Dopamine is the neurochemical responsible for the anticipation and gratification of reward. And it rules your life. And if you're a millennial or someone in Generation Z, it rules your life for sure, right? It's a very interesting topic because there's a lot of shiny objects when it comes to dopamine. There's a lot of principles and thought around it. Today I want to share with you a perspective and a strategy that I've used to master my dopamine and actually use it. Because dopamine is a tool, and if you don't see it as a tool or something you can use, then it will use you. Because most people's bodies are vehicles for pleasure, basically. And most people's existences are purely like a result of their slavery to this neurochemical and pleasure and reward. And I don't want that for you, because if that is you, then you're probably struggling in life. And if you run a company or have a business, then you're probably also struggling in business, because dopamine is basically gratification. And the majority of people obtain their dopamine through instant gratification. Business is delayed gratification. Instant results in business do not exist. And I can attest to that. And so today I'm going to share with you my strategy. And we're going to talk about dopamine fasting. It's quite a popular thing, but there's some ideas that I want to share with you. They've been very, very helpful for me, and I think they might help you as well. So, who am I? My name's Charlie, and I've built and scaled 2 companies. One of them is a marketing agency. I've scaled it to 7 figures, and I'm currently selling that agency for focus. I'm not selling my agency, I'm buying focus, in case you're wondering. People ask. The second company is called Imperium Agency. It's a coaching business that helps marketing agency owners, coaches and consultants acquire more clients and scale their businesses. Don't worry, this is not a pitch, nothing to sell you. So let's talk about dopamine, because it's really important to understand it, because otherwise it's going to rule your life. So most people's reward centers are fucked. And what I mean by that is most people's lives are built around reward, not around work. So in life, you have work and you have reward. And in life, there's a lot of things that you can do to achieve reward with no work. You have to understand that on a neurochemical level, your brain cannot differentiate between acquiring like a meaningful relationship or making money or doing something that actually means something and pushes you forward in a healthy direction. It can't differentiate between one of those actions and aimlessly scrolling through Instagram, eating a burger, or watching porn. It's a huge problem. If you want to get a girlfriend or a boyfriend and you want to like build a healthy relationship, then just deprive your reward center of porn. Right? So many people struggle with relationships these days, and they struggle with maintaining long-term commitment to someone or a human, right? And the reason they do that is because they're so obsessed with pornography and instant gratification through Tinder and stuff that like they can't build meaningful connections, because their brain fundamentally can't tell the difference between pornography and real life sexual encounters, right? Now, I'm not a sexual guru, and I'm not here to talk about that, but it's just an example that came to mind. So dopamine fasting is a very popular method these days to control your dopamine levels and try and bring yourself to a level that's more tolerable, so you're not like a slave to this chemical. The problem is that in life you want to address the cause and not the symptom, right? When you go to get treatment for a disease, a good doctor will treat the cause of the disease and not the symptom itself. Because the symptom itself is just like the result of the disease, and the disease is a result of something wrong with you. And if you fix the symptom, then you're not fixing the thing that's wrong with you. And dopamine fasting fixes symptoms, not causes. So your behavior is a result of conditioning. And what I mean by that is it's basically like you are a pattern, right? And what you do in the world and how you behave and how you act is a direct result of how you've behaved and acted in the past. And so right now, you're probably a little bit fucked, right? Everyone's a little bit fucked because they've never intervened with their chemistry and their biology. And biological vehicles of reward and gratification, if left unmonitored, will direct towards things that are very pleasurable and least painful. And so you need to monitor this. So dopamine is probably prevalent everywhere in your life. For example, you're on YouTube. You may not have searched for this video. You probably were just aimlessly clicking around and trying to get some dopamine from something. And you clicked on this video, and now you've probably got other tabs open. You might be listening to music. You might be eating some sort of salty or fatty food. You might be, I don't know what you're doing right now, right? But you want to sort of see dopamine as like a layer. Now I'm going to explain what I mean by this in dopamine fasting. So let's explain this. Dopamine fasting is the premise of basically removing everything that introduces pleasure to your life for a certain period of time. So it's kind of like you just starve yourself of pleasurable entities or pleasurable vehicles that produce dopamine. So you don't you don't eat food, you don't listen to music, you don't watch films, you don't play video games, and you just sort of deprive your brain of things that would produce a significant amount of dopamine over a 24-hour period. The problem is I don't know anyone that's changed their life through a 24-hour dopamine fast, because this is the main thing. You cannot change underlying biological, neurological structures in 24 hours. Now, you can do it on a psychological level with extremely painful events, because someone can have an extreme trauma in 5 minutes and change their life forever, right, in a bad way. But dopamine fasting will not fix your addictions, and it will not fix your lack of focus and your rabbit-like desire to get things immediately and get everything you want now. It doesn't work. When you try to tackle your dopamine problems, you've got to realize that you are trying to undo decades of conditioning. So it took me about 3 or 4 years to really actually take control of my dopamine and start using it to my advantage. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that later on in the video. So if you think that a 24-hour dopamine fast is going to fix all of your neurotic, insane reward centers, it won't. It will fix it temporarily, but it won't fix it for the long term. Because when you try to fix something, right, you've got to look at dopamine, you've got to think, right, I've been behaving in this neurotic, distracted, pleasurable way for decades. And one day of fasting is not going to fix that. So it's kind of look at it, if you look at dopamine, you look at gaining weight, it's kind of like if someone's really overweight and they do 1 day of fasting, they're still going to be fat, right? That's how you need to perceive the dopamine thing. Because I see everyone they're really overweight in terms of their dopamine levels, right? They're fucking fat when it comes to how much dopamine they have got, or how fucked up their reward centers are because they've just stimulated themselves over and over and over again. It's kind of like the biggest tragedy of the 21st century is just complete overstimulation all the time at constant intervals. It's horrible. So if someone who's really overweight suddenly does 1 day fast, they're still going to be overweight. Now, the days following that fast might be better in terms they might start eating healthier, they might start going to the gym after that 1 day of fasting, but 1 day is not enough to reverse and undo decades and decades of conditioning and neurological, biological damage. It just doesn't work. So dopamine fasting, it kind of sounds cool and it kind of sounds sexy and it works for the short term, but the irony is that dopamine fasting is actually an activity that gives you more dopamine, because it's a shiny object and it's something that you do and then suddenly you feel really good about yourself and it produces all this dopamine. So by actually doing the fast and by saying I did a dopamine fast, you feel good and then you produce loads of dopamine and then you actually are still back at square one. So I don't really like dopamine fasts. I've done them lots of times before because I used to find value in them because they'd give me this short-term sort of boost to push forward into projects. But I eventually realized that I had to make a change to my lifestyle. You can't make changes to your lifestyle in 1 day. It has to be you have to reverse your patterns and your habits and try again. So what's the solution here? Well, you've got to realize that dopamine, it's you've got your life right here, and then what people do is they layer dopamine on to their existence in any given time. So at the moment, right now, look at your behavior and look at what you might be unconsciously doing to layer on more dopamine into your life. Maybe your phone's on your desk. Maybe you've got notifications on that phone. Maybe you've got another tab open with another video to watch already. Maybe you've got Spotify open and you're halfway through listening to a song. Maybe you've just finished a bag of crisps or you look into your bin and you see a chocolate wrapper, right? And there might be other things that you're doing, but look at your surroundings and you'll see manifests and outputs of behavior that lead to instant reward. And what you're doing by participating in these behaviors is layering more dopamine on. You're making this layer just thicker and thicker and thicker. Another example is driving. When you drive or when you walk, do you listen to music? Do you listen to podcasts? Are you still technically using your phone? Are you talking to people? Are you thinking through things? Every chance that you get, are you, for example, are you taking your phone to the toilet, right? Are you listening to music when you cook? Are you working whilst also doing some stuff on social media? You've got to start becoming aware of the behaviors that lead to reward, and you'll notice that it's not the conscious things, it's the unconscious things. It's one example for me is always putting mayonnaise on food. I've been doing that for like 10 years, and I realized, shit, man, you're just layering extra dopamine on into your life. You're just layering on reward, layering on more reward. Now, you don't want to stop rewarding yourself, and I'm not saying that you should stop doing things like eating mayonnaise and listening to music. You just want to have it in check. So, an example, I drove up to Newcastle to see a friend. I live in Bristol in the UK. Newcastle is literally at the other end of the country. It's a 6-hour drive. Usually on a 6-hour drive, I would listen to music and I'd be blasting songs and I'd be like listening to podcasts and like just trying to keep myself entertained on this drive because I don't want to be bored. But I realized that what if I just do like 6 hours of driving with no music? And I did it. And I felt when I got there, this is the interesting thing, is when I got there, I had no stimulation for 6 whole hours basically. And when I arrived at my destination to see my friend, his presence was so much more rewarding, and the food we ate tasted so much better, and everything seemed so much more happy, right? And I realized like, shit, why does this steak taste so good? Why are Vince's jokes so funny? I was like, shit, I'm experiencing reward in a healthy way. Because those are things like going out for food with your friends and going to see your friends. If those things don't feel really exciting, then there's something wrong with your pleasure sensor, right, in your brain. And so like, I'd invite you to try this. Don't do a dopamine fast. Just become aware of the behaviors that produce just constant dopamine in your life and just layer it on. Like, do you pick your phone up when you first wake up? Do you randomly scroll through Instagram before you go to sleep? Just start to observe your existence in isolation to all of the things you do to layer on this chemical to make you feel better. That's how I handle dopamine. Now let's talk about, we've kind of just talked about what I want to talk about. There's nothing else to really cover. I was going to say, let's talk about dopamine fasting. And like, dopamine fasting is a good way to start, but it's not a good way to finish because you can't really finish it. It's kind of like you can change your underlying, like the whole idea behind a dopamine fast is you do it, and then your dopamine receptors basically become far more receptive to anything because they're starved. It's kind of like if you starve your stomach and then you eat something you may not even like, you'll still kind of enjoy it because it's food and you need calories, and your body will prioritize like calories over your preference as to where the calories come from. It's the same principle. But the only time I've ever found a dopamine fast to be useful is to addict myself to work. So like if you're ever in like a complete rut, and you really just can't seem to escape what is known in Pinocchio's story as Pleasure Island, which is where you're just on this island of pleasure and there's no pain and it feels horrible after a while. If you're conscientious, it'll feel horrible. A lot of people had this in COVID-19 during the lockdown. They were all on like stimulus checks, and in the UK it was called furlough. They were just being paid to do nothing. And what they found throughout isolation and COVID is that depression rates and anxiety rates went through the roof. A lot of people attributed that to a lack of social interaction, which might be true, but from my perspective, it was because nobody had anything to do. It was just pleasure, 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 pleasure. And when you take pleasure to an extreme, you face pain, right? So dopamine fasting, it works if you want to temporarily addict yourself to work. So for example, when I enter monk mode, or when I find myself slipping into a rut of just endless pleasure, I'll do a fast and I'll try and cut it all away. And then what happens is if you do a dopamine fast on Sunday and the first thing you do on Monday is work, then your brain will find work more rewarding and more pleasurable. And so you can every week kind of recondition your brain to actually enjoy work, because the first thing you do coming out of a dopamine fast will feel more interesting and more rewarding than anything. And so like if you do work as soon as you come out of a dopamine fast and it's the first thing you expose yourself to, it's the thing that becomes the most rewarding eventually, because your brain associates it with so much pleasure because it's ready to attach pleasure to basically anything. Like you could stop doing a dopamine fast and you could go and just like go and watch the birds, or like go and like fucking drive or something, or listen to a song, and it will feel like the most pleasurable, like rewarding experience you could ever do. And so the only time a dopamine fast works is eventually like when you finish the fast, you can go and do the thing that you were intending on doing or putting off, and it will feel more rewarding. I do this with program recording. So like if I'm really putting something off, which I don't really do anymore, I used to do it, I would dopamine fast and then I'd start doing program recording and it would feel a lot more meaningful. And now I love program recording, so it kind of works. So yeah, master your dopamine, otherwise it will master you. If you don't have control over your reward centers will run you. And like, if you don't bring this stuff to your conscious mind, like what's in your bin, what's on your internet history, what have you just done, what have you just listened to, what have you just watched, like, you know, there's just, you've got to start looking at outputs of your behavior and becoming aware of all of these things you're doing to acquire dopamine and just get like as much reward from life as possible. Because I'll tell you, man, like if you're trying to build anything or run a business or do anything in life that's meaningful, and like the rest of your existence is just geared towards instant gratification, the brain will expect instant gratification from everything you do. Like how you do one thing is literally how you do everything. So if all of your life is centered around like constant reward, and it could be anything from alcohol to drugs to all this music to all these films to video games constantly to junk food, if you have all of that going on and then you try and start a business, you're fucked. Because your brain's like universal way of dealing with anything or expecting anything from anything is just nothing but instant reward. And like I said, business is delayed gratification. The two words are synonymous. You do hard work now for a long time without getting anything to eventually see rewards that you may not even be able to consciously attribute to the work you did before because of how cause and effect and memory works. That's a story for another day. But that's everything. I wanted to share this with you. Don't like necessarily think that dopamine fasting is going to completely fix you. Just make a long-term change to your lifestyle and give it a couple of years, and eventually you'll be like, okay, now I can actually control this thing and I can start to use dopamine to my advantage. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. If you run a company, by the way, if you're an agency owner or a coach and a consultant and you need more clients and you're struggling to acquire clients, check out the first link in the description. There's a funnel. It's designed to sell you a call, right, with one of our sales reps. But if you actually can't grow your company and you're really struggling and you work with like local businesses, or you're a coach or a consultant or your marketing agency owner, just click that first link and check it out. You don't have to, of course. By all means, just stick around and subscribe and like the video, etc. But if you want to check it out, feel free to. Talk to you later. Have a good day. Cheers.